On this edition of McDougall, herbalist David Hoffman will challenge your assumptions about natural remedies. Hello, I'm Wayne Judd. And now here's a man who challenges the assumptions of the medical establishment, Dr. John.
Well, I got challenged recently. You know, I try and tell people how to choose proper cookware.
Right.
And I was at one of the restaurants, one of the many restaurants that serve healthy food in my town of Santa Rosa, California. And somebody sat next to me said, well, this restaurant uses aluminum pots and pans to cook your healthy food. And I was embarrassed.
Because that's not healthy?
Do you use aluminum pots and pans in your home?
I avoid the kitchen, John. I wish you hadn't
So you
asked
don't
that
know
question.
what's in the... The problem with aluminum is that it's a toxin to the system, and it is, I believe, the only controllable cause of Alzheimer's disease. And not only do I believe it, the scientific literature is solidly behind that belief.
Well, you know, I heard that just a few weeks ago, and ironically, even this very morning, as I was getting up and about, so for some odd reason, it came to my mind, that business of this whole possibility with Alzheimer's. And so I looked at my deodorant, and there it was, aluminum chlorhydrate or
aluminum chloride, some chlorohydrate, sure.
Yeah, and that was the primary ingredient that was listed. So, you know, am I going a little
It wasn't just a deodorant, it was an antiperspirant.
No, it was an antiperspirant,
right.
That's correct. It is an antiperspirant.
And that's the difference, and people have to remember that as we discuss that. There's a difference between deodorants, which generally don't have the aluminum, and antiperspirants, which stop the perspiration.
So are you saying that the aluminum, I coat my armpits with aluminum to get them to quit sweating?
The worst thing to do, Wayne, is to spray the armpits with this aluminum, have it enter through the nose.
Oh.
In cases of Alzheimer's disease, the worst cases of Alzheimer's disease have the lesions that are typical of Alzheimer's disease in the extension of the brain known as the olfactory lobes. And so what's believed is the most serious portal of entry into the body for aluminum, which causes the Alzheimer's disease, is through the nose into the olfactory tracts. And before that, the source of that aluminum was industrial. Now, and we won't see this for another 20, 30 years, now what I suspect is they'll link it back to well-intentioned people trying to stop the perspiration, but missing the armpit and hitting their nose.
And breathing it.
The reason we know that Alzheimer's disease is caused, in part, by aluminum is because of the extensive research that's been done.
There really has been research.
Tremendous. But, you know, the message out there is it's all controversial. And, of course, a lot of that message comes from the aluminum industry and those people that don't want to throw away their aluminum pots and pans. But Alzheimer's patients, their brains are loaded with aluminum, say, compared to patients who die of strokes. The lesions that are typical of Alzheimer's disease, they have a central core of aluminum silicate. You can't have the disease without these lesions. You can't have the lesions without aluminum silicate. Drinking water around the world and in various countries is associated with the incidence of Alzheimer's disease, depending upon how much aluminum's in that drinking water, just over and over and over.
So this is not hereditary?
It's not hereditary.
It's environmental?
Absolutely.
If my parents get Alzheimer's, I don't have to worry about it if I avoid aluminum?
In the last 13 years in California, it's increased tenfold the incidence of Alzheimer's disease because of the increased use of aluminum in the past 50, 60 years.
That's terrifying.
Now, you may say there's controversy here, but the one thing I want to warn you about is you don't want to be a human guinea pig that finally establishes whether or not Alzheimer's disease is caused by aluminum. Avoid that experiment,
Give it up.
Wayne.
Okay.
Just avoid the experiment.
I'm convinced.
After this break, David Hoffman will be here to talk about herbal medicine. Stay with us. This has been a good show. You are going to...
Hello. The job market is a competitive place. In today's economy, extra skills mean a better job for you. Speaking English is the skill you need for greater opportunity, more money, and a brighter future. Introducing Hello Channel, an exciting new television channel that teaches English as you watch TV. There's something for everyone, and the more you watch, the faster you'll learn. All you have to do is say hello.
And with us is David Hoffman. You remember David Hoffman from a few shows back. Herbal medicine is what we talked about, and I couldn't get enough of it. I love the subject of herbal medicine, and I have some resentment here, and that is that I was not given this kind of educational background in medical school. I should have been taught how to help my patients with herbal preparations. And I was left with the attitude, and it continued until I met David Hoffman and similar people who are knowledgeable in herbs. I was left with the attitude that herbs were ineffective. They're just, plants, weeds, self-administered things that do little good. And the few of them that had some potency to them, they'd knock your liver out. They'd make you sick. And so I had a very bad attitude, but that attitude was instilled, and I have to guess, somewhat by purpose in me as a medical student. And I think the whole population has that. David Hoffman has several books out that we'll tell you about in a minute. Why is it that herbal medicine has gotten such a bad rap?
You've got to remember it's only in this country. It's not a bad rap in the Western medical system in general. And I'm afraid I have to conclude that it's an economic, political issue. It's not a scientific issue.
Now, I look in the medical journals, and if an herb causes somebody to get, say, a toxicity of the liver, one patient, even if it happens to be a contaminant of that herbal preparation, say with some powerful arthritis drug that a pharmaceutical company makes, it hits the biggest medical journals with a splash story and then off into the media. One case in maybe the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that are helped by herbs, it never hits the press.
But the implication here is that medicine doesn't care whether we're well or not. Is that what you're implying? Well, surely medicine cares whether we're well. If they could do better, why don't they? Just for money? For money, people, the whole profession would sell out?
There's a big difference between the practice of medicine and the manufacture of medicinal substances. And I didn't want to imply that it was doctors, one-on-one doctors, that had this bias. It is a result of moving into high technology-based medicine, which you can really see as battlefield medicine, emergency medicine, which modern medicine does incredibly well. But in the development of the multinational drug companies and very high technologically based examination techniques, they've just got built up an economic momentum to go for more and more and more specialization.
Yeah. As well as a great marketing job with all of us in the public.
Yes.
We want pills and shots.
Well, let me give you one very specific example. You were just talking about the occasional case of liver damage, and it's an important issue. But to work out the relative safety of a drug, you have to have the LD50, the amount of the dosage which is poisonous, and then you compare that with what's called the ED50, the effective dose, and then you do a risk-benefit analysis. With the FDA in a position where they're denying any efficacy to medicinal plants, if you have one case, but they don't acknowledge there can be an ED50 at all, that one case means statistically this is the most poisonous thing ever. So there's just this built-in bias, institutionally built-in, which has got to be overcome. And this is starting to change.
But it's starting to change from a grassroots point of view. It's the consumer demand for these preparations.
But there's also a change within the medical community.
Doctors are prescribing this. I know you gave a talk to the doctors at the hospital where I practice, and it was an overwhelming success. I thought I was throwing the sheep into the lion's den, but I knew he could handle the job. And when you left there, you left some very, very well-educated physicians really wondering why they didn't get a better education in herbs.
I think part of the problem is that most herbalists in this country, because of the suppression of the herbal medical schools which used to exist, don't really have a background in science and medicine. So when they try and talk about what they know their herbs can do, the language can sound very flaky at times, if that's the right American expression. What I was doing with us, the doctors at your hospital, was using examples from the literature and trying to remember all the medicine I used to know so that I could communicate in a language that was their language. And when you do that, then there's openness.
We understood.
Yeah.
You practiced herbal medicine, helped people for a long time. If you were going to convince, say, a group of patients or a group of doctors that this is real legitimate stuff that really works, what kind of problem would you treat and what kind of herb would you got one shot at it, David Hoffman, one shot. You want to make a demonstration that herbs do a lot of good.
That's sounding a bit biblical. But I would say that the real strong area for natural medicine in general, but especially herbal medicine, is treating the degenerative diseases, not trying to treat acute life-threatening conditions. Just about anything in the digestive system and digestive system dysfunction can be addressed very rapidly with herbal medicine.
How about indigestion?
Yes, yes, but then what is indigestion?
Well, heartburn. It's
yeah,
heartburn. It's the
heartburn,
stuff that they send me out to buy antacids for.
anything that the drug Tagamet can do, a herb called marshmallow, used at high enough dosage, will do symptomatically the same. It works in a very different way, so the blood chemistry will be different, but you can achieve the same results, and actually you can achieve them faster.
How about, I've heard cabbage is also good for indigestion, ulcer problems.
Very much.
And bananas, I've heard too. Extract of bananas.
Yes, yes. There's a whole range. I mean, that's why I'm not able to come up with one herb, because that's like saying, what would a really good green nutritional plant be? You know, we need a range of them.
I wonder how much you could charge for bananas if you put them in a capsule.
Well, have you seen those capsules of powdered beet powder? Beetroot.
That is a little bit.
You know,
of a
John,
problem.
this is a question that we probably are coming up
Yeah,
for
we'll
a break,
get
but
to
I
that.
have a question about how much it costs to go herbal.
And we'll answer that in just a moment, and I'll also tell you about David Hoffman's books. We'll be back with David Hoffman in just a minute.
Hello. That's right, I said hello. I'm talking about an exciting new television channel that will change your life. My name is Ruth, and I want you to be one of the first to know about Hello Channel. Hello Channel is designed to teach you to speak English. Anyone can learn. We offer something for everyone. You'll see programming for children, teenagers, and adults, all on different levels. With Hello Channel, you'll hear, see, read, and speak English as you're watching entertaining television programs, making it easy to learn. If you've always wanted to learn English but haven't had a chance, Hello Channel is perfect for you. Start today, and remember, for a brighter future, just say hello.
And with me is David Hoffman. David Hoffman is professor of integral health at the Integral Studies Institute in San Francisco. He's also author of many books and a CD-ROM. It's called The Herbalist. You can plug this into your IBM computer or your Apple Macintosh computer, and you could bring up the herbs and also the problems, and by computer technology, it'll put the two together and help you tremendously. Also a book called An Elder's Herbal, which is a practical book on making plant medicine your friend, and The New Holistic Herbal, again, another practical book for people to use to identify the herbs that could be an advantage to their problems. And then for doctors, for people who are interested in the scientific basis of herbal medicine, he's written a scientific book. It's the information source book of herbal medicine. And so if you'd like to go to the original literature on this, that book will help you. You were asking a question before I
thank you,
did
John. David, I'm wondering about the economics of herbal medicine. Can I afford it? Is it more or less expensive? Will my health plan cover it, as opposed to getting amitriptyline, or it's the only drug that jumped into my brain at the moment? But you got my question.
Yeah.
What's the economics of this?
Confusing. This is a point where I start to lose friends in the herbal industry, because as far as I'm concerned, herbalism should be, I suppose we could say, the people's medicine. If you know the plants, you can pick them. If you don't know the plants, don't pick them,
Right.
just in case.
Right.
In states where naturopathic medicine is licensed, and California is not one of them, but in the states where it is, then if the herbs are prescribed by a naturopathic physician, then they can be covered by insurance. There are ways of using herbs so that it is really quite cheap compared to the real costs of drug medicine. However, if your prescription is covered by insurance and the cost of herbal tinctures isn't, then it will look like the herbs are more expensive.
How about if you grow them in your garden? Can you do that?
Yeah, and you don't even have to pay PG&E. It's free.
Yeah, let me talk about some specific things that always come to me. How about treating female hormone problems like PMS with herbal medicine?
very successful when the right herbs are used. And unfortunately, most of the products that I've seen on the market, which are herbal PMS treatments, don't have the right herbs in them. You know, they're simply water removal approaches. There's a herb called skullcap, which I should explain the name. It's called skullcap because of the medieval European academics wore funny little caps on the top of their head. The top of the flower looks like one of those, if you're a botanist. That plant is amazing at changing the psychological symptoms of PMS. It doesn't remove PMS, it just changes it into a more positive state. For ongoing problems, if this happens every month, then Vitex used every day over 2 or 3 months will usually calm down the ups and downs. And then if there is cramping, dysmenorrhea, there's a plant called cramp bark.
Cramp bark, that was convenient.
Yes, well, if anybody knows botany, you look at the Latin names of most of the plants, they're named after their medical use. So cramp bark.
There's a whole subject of medicine, plant medicine, that's getting a lot of attention, and that's phytoestrogens, plant hormones, and they speak of yams and they speak of soybeans, and it's not quite herbal, but it's still in the plant kingdom that we're talking about.
This is a very confused and confusing area. A phytoestrogen does not mean that a plant has estrogen in it. It means it has constituents which will trigger off estrogen receptor sites sometimes. Now, most of the things which are called phytoestrogens are things called isoflavones, which means they're related to the chemicals which make leaves change color in the fall. And they work by part of their shape of the molecule being similar to part of the estrogen shape, so they fit in receptor sites, but they don't have estrogenic effects per se. The strongest source of these, the richest source I should say, are soybeans. Now, if soybeans really did have an estrogenic effect, I mean, just this might sound a bit silly, there wouldn't be a population explosion in China. Because they eat a lot of tofu, the men eat a lot of tofu. If it really was estrogenic, their fertility would go down. So the word being used carries the connotation that we're getting estrogens.
But it does have an effect on a woman's menstrual cycle.
Very definitely.
So
but it's a subtle, gentle one.
It's a gentle one which protects women from breast cancer before menopause.
Yes.
Then after menopause, they say that people in Eastern countries that eat lots of rice and beans and soybeans, they don't have menopausal symptoms. They don't have hot flashes. Have you heard that?
I've heard that. I want more evidence before I completely embrace that one. I wonder partially whether there's also cultural issues. I wouldn't want to see menstrual issues or menopausal issues purely pharmacologically. Culturally, this is not really a very sane culture to be a woman in. Women are really given a hard time in all sorts of roles they have to fulfill. And I wonder whether menopause is as uncomfortable as it is because it's social roles.
You and I will
that are
never know,
changing.
will we?
No.
Well,
no.
we'll just have to leave it to people to tell us. If the herbal issues confuse you a bit, there's a way to straighten it out. David Hoffman's written several books. He has the new Holistic Herbal, which is a very practical book. Also an Elder's Herbal, and it's a way that you can go to the herb and to your problems and sort them out. And if you have a computer, IBM or Apple, in your computer store is the herbalist that you can buy. We'll be back in a minute with our special guest, David Hoffman.
Watch TV and learn English at the same time on Hello Channel.
Hey Dad, can you come out and shoot some hoops with me?
Busy.
Studies show that by the time I'm 12, I can be influenced by friends more than parents.
Give your family everything. Give them your time.
And with us is David Hoffman. He's a very practical man, and herbal medicine is his specialty.
David, I have a question for you. Before our break, we were talking about the good fortune other countries and cultures have. What concerted or organized effort do we see in the medical community or in the herbal community to actually tap into those kinds of resources? I mean, are we just, again, sometimes I sense that America is we have it all and we know it all, but are we reaching out and connecting so that we can grow and learn through?
Well, you know, actually, in terms of the worldwide herbal community, there's actually been suggestions that there should be medical herbalists sent as a sort of missionary task to help the poor Americans who are lacking
Project
in this.
Hope.
There's
Project Herb.
The World Health Organization funds something called the Traditional Medicines Program, which is looking at ways in which indigenous traditional, usually herbal approaches can be linked in with Western Orthodox medicine. And incredible work's being done on that.
That's
There's only
tremendous.
one country in the world where that doesn't happen, and that's here.
Interesting.
Well, we have the pharmaceutical companies
Yes.
that make up for all that.
Yes.
How about we hear a lot about herbs, and the household word is ginseng. How about ginseng as the tonic for youth, the tonic for, well, anything you would want, I guess?
Well, there are lots of different ginsengs, which is one of the confusing issues here. Ginseng belongs to a category of plant actions called adaptogens, which help you cope and deal with stress. And they're very, very useful, but you can only use them so far. What we Westerners tend to do is when something good comes along, we use it to its limits, and then we need something else to help us. Ginseng really comes into its own when it's used as a way of coping with stressful situations, changing the stress, and removing it. If ginseng is just used regularly to work harder, do more, then a collapse is going to come eventually. The plant which I recommend, rather than Panax ginseng, the one that is so well known, is something called Siberian ginseng. Ordinary ginseng can overstimulate some people. It's not uncommon to get headaches. Siberian ginseng doesn't cause any of those problems, and it's a lot cheaper.
But how can you tell whether you've got real ginseng, whether you've got the proper dose? And this applies to all herbs. I mean, the consumer beware out there, I suppose.
Yeah, and this is why the FDA is essential, I'm afraid to say.
So you're in favor of sort of regulation?
Because the marketplace has really shown that it can't police itself properly. There are some excellent herb companies, but there are some really dubious organizations. There is a really important role for the FDA. However, what it's doing at the moment makes no sense whatsoever. But there is an important need for regulation.
Once you get it back into that realm, though, face it, David, aren't we again looking at commercializing this thing to the extent that it's just going to become another rip-off? Once we find it's better, then maybe the pharmaceuticals will move toward herbs and capture the market, and we'll...
They can't patent them.
No, but they can patent mixtures and combinations. Yes, it's a concern. It's a real concern. You have to bear in mind that all of the big drug companies, other than the genetic engineering ones, they all started as herbal product companies in the last century.
Interesting. Well, I guess I'm just skeptical that herbalists are going to be any nicer than pharmacies. Is that bad?
No, it's a good question.
Economics seems to drive everything.
One of the real saving graces of herbalism is that most of the people in it are in it because they love it, not because they're in it to
They're
make
good
money.
people. They're supposed to, we think of you as being a good person because this is what you do.
No comment on that one.
Maybe when it comes to
Care nothing for
successful
the
money,
money,
will
of
make you
course.
bad.
Yeah, but a lot of the herbal companies are choosing not to grow. They're choosing to be very regional, very local, and just producing good quality products for the local market. And I think that's the saving grace to avoid the trap that you
One
see.
quick last question. You think herbal medicine is going to become more and more popular?
Yes. Yes, it's. I do a lot of teaching around the country, and interest is just skyrocketing.
Thank you, David Hoffman. Always a fascinating subject.
Happy to be here.
Until next time, stay healthy and happy. Spirit.